Gets our special transportation fund fixed, takes care of our roads and bridges in a real way without raiding the rainy day fund, without piling on $700 million a year in debt on the backs of the Connecticut taxpayers. We sat down, legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle, and said, we like this plan. This plan works and the numbers add up. And if you want to reach a compromise, we're ready to talk. But otherwise, we're ready to get this passed. There was talk about hiring a consultant and see if we could bring down overall costs over a period of time. There was talk about long-term structural deficits. I said, I'm here to solve problems, not to study problems. We have a problem that we inherited, a special transportation fund that's going underwater. We've been noticed that we have bridges that not in a state of good repair, and we have to fix it. We have a credible plan to fix it that doesn't raid the rainy day fund, and I think that's what we should start with. They're going to go back and.
Which plan are you talking about?
Pardon?
Which plan are you talking about?
Well, one
His
plan.
plan or your plan?
It's our plan.
Yeah, but which one is it? Is it trucks only, or is it?
I said, let's start with trucks only. You don't want cars and trucks. I salute the Democrats from the House. They've come forward with a plan. It raises us over $280 million. This is real money that we can do. We can adjust those prices depending on where you want us to be. We can complement that money with some different ways, but let's get this thing started in an honest and comprehensive way.
Governor,
Does
just
it take
clarify,
money
but
from-
you heard-
Before we say a few things.
Before we do questions, I just want to give my take a little bit. And while I'm not the senior one of the delegation, with Marty being here a little longer, I've been around this for a little while. And our hopes today was coming into the room to have a discussion. Len put forward a plan that relied on the rainy day. And while the governor was reluctant, he wanted to have that conversation of, well, how much of the rainy day? If a recession comes, we always outline the 15%. And that was in the bipartisan budget. That's not a number this governor made up. It's not a number that Marty Looney made up. It's the number that we came to in the bipartisan budget that we thought would give the state of Connecticut and its residents the cushion it needed if a recession was to happen. Len wanted to change that, and we didn't dismiss it out of hand, but we had concerns. So when we came into the room today, we had the discussion of, well, if we can work out compromise in many areas. One of the other areas they said was, well, how do we know you're not going to go to cars after you go to trucks? I said, that's a fair question. What would you like to see? Anything up to a constitutional amendment. You can move forward with that. That's a plan. That's not preying on the residents' fears. That's not saying there's more to come. That's saying we are tolling trucks that do 80% of the damage to our roadways, the majority of which are out of state, and it's going to alleviate a burden that's going to be felt by our middle class otherwise. They like that. Themis raised the concern about the cost of construction. The governor immediately said, I'll absolutely talk about that. Let's have that conversation. What does that look like to you? So they named 4 or 5 issues that they took umbrage with our plan. Every time we all said, well, we'll have that conversation, it came back to, well, if it includes tolls, we don't want to have a conversation. So my question to them is, and I'm sure the governor will answer it, is why are they picking truck drivers over our middle class? Because that's what's going to happen. If we deplete this rainy day, and this is why I've said I've been here for a while and I've seen this story go before, when that recession comes and there's no money left in the savings account, we will cut education. We will cut nonprofits. And the other side of the aisle will say, oh, terrible managers they are. They didn't plan for something like this happening. Well, we did. But we also plan to move our infrastructure in the state of Connecticut forward, and that's why we came out with the truck-only tolling plan. Marty.
Thank you, Joe. I think that the House really has shown us the way by coming out with the truck-only plan, which is in effect a return to a version of what the governor had proposed in the election last year, and is in fact the only plan that is voter approved, given the virtue of the fact that he was in fact elected, running on that proposal. It is the Republicans are saying that, well, this would be the beginning of it, would be the nose under the camel's nose under the tent, the idea that you would eventually move toward cars anyway. That is certainly not the case. As the Speaker said, we would entertain going as far as a constitutional amendment to prevent passenger car tolls. The focus has to be on those trucks, both in-state and out-of-state. We believe that we'd be on strong footing to have that. It's reasonable. The trucks put a significant burden. The states on either side of us have truck tolls to significant degrees. We would adopt a revenue scheme that would be within that range of national policy regarding tolls on trucks, and it would be a significant component of the revenue stream that we need to enact the CT 2030 plan. Obviously, there's discussion about what the other components of that would be, but we believe that number could approach $180 million or perhaps even more on the truck piece alone. So that's the centerpiece of what we need to do, and it is absolutely essential that we get this done. There is, in fact, there is a real crisis in our state that we cannot just delay any longer in terms of the needed reconstruction of our roads and bridges. We need to get this done now. We don't want the issue to drag on into the 2020 session. We think we have momentum on that issue, and the time to move is now. And we are certainly willing to listen to other Republican proposals. Obviously, their proposal on the rainy day fund we think was entirely too large and really puts us at risk in the next major recession. But again, there is room for talk as long as they're willing to continue to negotiate. We put out, I think, a forthright plan today.
Does this new plan include any use of rainy day funds? Does the new plan include the use of any rainy day funds?
The conversation is still happening, but we believe that there's a better plan that does not involve using the rainy day fund. I mean, let's just be clear that the door on tolls for cars is closed. And so we're talking about trucks only right now. And the fact of the matter is we can talk about a number of different options as to why we can't fix our transportation system, or we can talk about or a number of reasons why not to fix transportation, or we can talk about this issue and how to fix transportation throughout the state of Connecticut. But I think we've come up with a good plan, a good compromise, and I want to thank the governor and certainly Senator Looney and Representative Simowitz, Representative Ritter, and everybody for working so hard on this issue, because it is extremely important that we get this issue done, behind us, and that people of Connecticut have confidence in fixing our transportation infrastructure that has gone on unfinished for too long.
Marty, are you saying that?
Chris,
Real quick,
I
think the thing I kept hearing in that room was about trust and trust in government. So how is it trusting in government? In 2017, we passed a historic bipartisan agreement with one goal in mind: to give ourselves stability in the long term for the next recession, to send a signal to Wall Street, to send a signal to investment people who buy our bonds every year, that we are going to have a rainy day fund and we're going to restrict ourselves from using it. We're going to have bond covenants in place to do that. Never before in Connecticut. And then when the moment gets tough, when you have to make a tough decision, we do what every generation before us did. We sell the next generation down the road. We deplete that rainy day fund, they get left with $1 billion, and in 5 years, we go, boy, I wish we had not done that. And I would ask anyone in Connecticut who's going to see grandma tomorrow, or grandpa on Friday, or their sister and their brother, in Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, I want you to count the 18-wheelers, and I want your kids to tell me where those license plates comes from in those states. It's going to be Oklahoma, Nevada, everything around the country, and they will pay in every single state. There are bridges that will cross from Connecticut into New York that will pay $94. They pay nothing here. Governor Cuomo jokes in New York that he gets almost 40% of his revenue from Connecticut drivers alone. We are only going after 18-wheel large trucks and light trucks like every other state to invest in our middle class and our infrastructure. That is an honest plan, it will work, and we are not going to burden future generations by sweeping the rainy day fund by $1.5 billion.
As much as we appreciate the preview of the 2020 talking points, but somebody give us an overview of what the hell this thing looks like. The governor said 280 million.
So-
You two said
Depends on the rate,
186.
Mark.
Yeah,
186.
okay.
So, and we may bounce around a little bit because honestly, we've all had different portions. So what this would do, as far as the rainy day fund, I heard that question. It would maintain the 15% as was passed in the bipartisan budget. When additional monies are going in, those would be consistent with the budget also, pay down the liabilities. We would then use the savings from those payments to go into the transportation fund. But it would have to get to the 15%, and then we would start taking
You set a
off.
target, I mean, the governor's plan, the one a few weeks ago, was 320 million in tolling revenue. What is the target for this plan, however you get there?
So it's a little bit short, it's about 280 million. And it would be a combination of the tolling, the price tag of about 180 million to 200 million. I'm glad you're here. And the additional money we would get by paying down some of the liabilities when we reach the 15%. And then also other cost savings. We would ask DOT or require DOT to have a 10% cost savings on the majority of the projects moving forward. We'd also put into place the Transportation Oversight Board to ensure the costs are comparable with neighboring states, and if we can borrow and use their plans, whether it's rail stations or others, we're saving money there. The state of Connecticut has actually done a great job under this governor's leadership in DOT with the on-site building and the cost that it saves there. Not only does it have minimal impact to the people using the roadways, we save money by building it right next to the current bridge and then swapping it in. So combination thereof, our plan would reach about 280 million.
When are you and your Senate colleagues going to actually have a plan, run it by your caucuses, and be able to come back and tell the governor that you can pass one? Because, I mean, he seems ready and willing to make a deal here. He needs some partners.
Yeah, no, he is, and I think that's fair. Speaking for the House, I did not want to go to my caucus with yet another plan. I was hopeful that we could compromise with our Republican colleagues, take a lot of things that they wanted to do with the consideration and enact them, being trucks only, all the way up to a constitutional amendment. That was suggested by Senator Looney, and I thought that was a great compromise. But they weren't interested if it had anything to do with tolls, and quite honestly, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Joe, can I follow up? Wait a minute, you guys haven't demonstrated that you can get 76 votes in the House or 18 votes in the Senate to get any tolling plan done. So, again, when will you be able to come back to the governor and tell him, Governor, we can do this?
So,
As House and Senate Democrats, we can do this.
I thought I just answered that. I did not want to go to my caucus until such
Yeah.
time as that there was a plan. We will be meeting with our caucuses in the coming weeks and days.
Joe,
Listen,
can I
go
can
through
I
the numbers for 1 second?
Sure,
Just to give,
absolutely. Mr. Speaker was 100% on point. We're looking at a truck-only bridge tolling plan that will generate around $180 million. We are going to preserve the rainy day fund and consistent with current law. When the excess above 15% becomes available, we'll use that to pay down stairs liability and provide additional capacity in the Special Transportation Fund. And lastly, we also modeled out in partnership with our Democratic leaders, stretching the repayment terms to 35 years for the TIFIA and RIF. And so these are the items we discussed today that the leadership will be bringing back, and in due time we will bring forth those details to the media. Melissa, can I follow that? And I've asked this to you and to Joe, because here's the logic problem that I have with your solution. You're saying, listen, guys, we're not touching the rainy day fund until we go over the limit. You guys know, based on the projections, you don't go over the limit till next September 30th. That's when the fiscal year's over and the audit's done. What's your contingency plan if you run into recession before then? Either your plan has a huge hole in it, or you've got to have another option, like
It's a great
do
question,
what
Keith.
Len did and go after the rainy day
It's a great question,
fund.
and that's why
$180 million
that's right. We are much better positioned with the additional truck tolling revenues and the more, the return returns we're leveraging. At the end of the day, there's a range of what this plan can afford.
Well, what do you do if it's not there?
We will have two plans. We will make sure that we can fund infrastructure within both of those plans. And at the end of the day, we will close the books, certify whether there's a surplus, and a year thereafter would become available to pay down debt.
Here's the
Just a quick
answer to your
follow-up.
question.
Len,
We got
Governor.
$186 million we're not gonna have otherwise, thanks to the
Yeah,
truck
but-
tolling. If we raise the rate to
You-
$10, we'll get, well above
Hear me
that.
out. You've got $100 million roughly of this plan that's tied to paying down the pension. You use the rainy day
No,
fund.
I think there's a
And
misunderstanding
you
here.
said 180 and then
That
another
180s
100.
is tolls.
Is right.
Tolls from
And then the
trucks.
other-
200.
And then there's the other 100.
No, it has nothing to do with paying down the pension.
Where does the other 100 come from? That gets you to 280.
Great, so 180 million for toll
Right.
revenue.
100 GO.
We are going to, that was an original plan, the use of the 100 GO. We're stretching repayment terms. It gets us another $200 million over the life of the 2030 plan. And last but not least, if all of the 15%, what I call waterfall, materializes over multiple years, yes, it does create up to $113 million of CSRS payment relief.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this leadership team is prepared to put forth a plan that fixes the STF, invests in the economy, within a range of capital investment funding. And so we will have to adjust the plan to make it work. But what the governor is not willing to do and what these leaders are not willing to do is to kick the can down the road a couple more years in solving the solution that we
Do you
need for
agree
this
though,
year.
that's last fall, that's a huge
All right.
adjustment. That
Great.
113 savings on your pension payments is no small, easy lift.
Keith, I think the confusion here is we're not jumping the shark. There will be nothing prepaid until after you hit the 15%. To the extent you hit 15% by state law, we have no choice but to prepay.
How
The
much can
Secretary
you
is
do though,
estimating what
Matt,
they would
until
do.
you've got it driven down? Doesn't that reduce the overall effectiveness of what you can project as a sure
Keith,
thing?
model out both ways, and we'll be happy to show you the numbers as a plan.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
For different sized trucks.
Marty.